Every successful empire reaches a pinnacle, a moment when it seems invincible. Trade routes hum with activity, wealth pours into cities, and art, science, and culture flourish. This is peak empire, and life seems beautiful. Today, we'll explore this moment of glory for our empires. But this is no mere victory lap. The Golden Age is as much about the cracks as it is about the glitter. Welcome to episode 3 of Just in Time Worldbuilding's fantastical empire. The Golden Age of Empire is a phase characterized by commerce, affluence, and intellectual achievements. These three interlocking stages form the backbone of an empire's most prosperous era, as defined in John Glubb's cyclical model, which we're using as the backbone for our discussion. So let's examine those three phases in the context of our historical and fantastical empires, starting with the foundation of imperial wealth, the commerce phase. The commerce phase marks the beginning of the Golden Age, where economic activity surges, driven by trade and the efficient movement of goods and resources. Empires establish vast networks to maximize wealth, often integrating conquered territories into their economic systems. From our examples, the Han Dynasty epitomized this phase with the development of the Silk Road trade routes, which connected China to Central Asia, the Middle East, and even Europe. Silk, spices, and porcelain flowed outward, while gold, horses, and other goods returned. This trade not only enriched the empire, but also strengthened its political and cultural ties across the vast regions. And if you want my ideas on how to build such a trade route, check out the information card linked right here. Turning to our second example empire, Rome's economic backbone was its unparalleled road system, much of which still exists today, which facilitated trade and military movement. The Mediterranean Sea, often called the Mare Nostrum, or Our Sea, became a Roman-dominated trade hub. Provinces like Egypt supplied grain, while Hispania provided precious metals, fueling the empire's growth. And in Africa, Axum thrived as a trading powerhouse, dominating the Red Sea trade routes. It connected the Mediterranean world to India and beyond, trading gold, ivory, and frankincense for luxury goods like spices and textiles. The spice must flow isn't just for fantasy. It also has its historical applications. Axiom's control of maritime commerce made it a wealthy and influential state. And how about our fantasy empires? Numenor, according to Tolkien's Legendarium, was a dominant trading empire because of its mastery of the seas. Its fleet brought wealth and power, but this economic expansion also fostered arrogance and exploitation, laying the seeds for its eventual downfall, the fault lines Sauron would exploit. Similarly, in Adrian Tchaikovsky's Shadows of the Apt, the Wasp Empire expanded its economy by subjugating others, extracting tribute and resources to fuel its relentless growth. The Wasps are a very interesting example in this case because, like the Romans, different parts of the empire were in different phases of the cycle. At the borders of the empire, the war machine grinds on, conquering new territory and putting those nations in the conquest phase, while closer to the heart of the empire, the Golden Age begins to take hold and territories become wholly part of the empire. And we'll talk more about the conquered territories in just a bit, but for now, consider that different parts of your empire can be in the commerce phase, while others are still in the conquered phase. And let's move on to the affluence phase, where wealth truly blooms. Once wealth accumulates, the empire enters a period of affluence, where prosperity seeps into the lives of its citizens, though not always evenly, as we discussed in the episode on social cohesion, which you can check out in the information card. Art, luxury, and monumental architecture flourish during this period as the empire showcases their might and sophistication. Let's hit our examples to see what that might look like. Affluence in Han China was marked by the flourishing of cities like Chang'an, filled with bustling markets and grand palaces and intricate gardens. This was also the era of paper invention, revolutionizing administration and knowledge dissemination. Rome's affluence is best symbolized by monumental projects like the Colosseum, aqueducts, and sprawling villas for the elite. The Pax Romana, Roman peace, created a stable environment that allowed the arts and culture to thrive, benefiting both Rome and its provinces. And Axiom's affluence is evident in its monumental obelisks, which serve as symbols of wealth and power. The empire's elites enjoyed a lavish lifestyle supported by the riches of their trade networks. And turning to fantasy, the wealth of empires truly shines in this affluence phase. Numenor's marble white cities, adorned with towering spires, embody affluence. The island's splendor was a beacon of its dominance. But beneath the gold and silver lay growing disparities and dissatisfaction. In the Wasp Empire, technological advancements led to vast industrial centers, showcasing the empire's industrialization and might, but also fostering inequality and unrest among the subjugated kingdoms, breeding resentments and the seeds of the eventual fall in the heart of empire. Affluence is a great phase to set your empire in if you don't really want to futz too much with the politics of the empire. There's enough underlying fault lines to create some narrative tension, but the empire is pretty stable. And if you don't want to handle its rise and its fall, this is a great spot in its history in which to set your story. It's at the plateau of its greatness, not yet falling and not rising. But maybe you do want a bit more tension than that. So let's talk about that phase that trembles right on the edge of decline, when the culture reaches its height, the intellectual phase. The intellectual phase represents the peak of an empire's cultural and scientific achievement. Philosophers, scientists, and artists thrive, leaving a legacy that often outlives the empire itself. In the Han Empire, Confucian ideals reached their zenith during this period, shaping governance and social ethics. The creation of detailed historical records like Records of the Grand Historian by Sima Qian solidified the intellectual legacy of the Han dynasty. Rome saw an explosion of literature, philosophy, and engineering feats. Figures like Virgil, Seneca, and Pliny the Elder contributed to a rich intellectual heritage, while Roman law became a cornerstone of Western legal systems. Axiom's adoption of Christianity not only solidified and unified its territories, but also spurred theological advancements and cultural integration. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church became a lasting testament to Axiom's intellectual contributions even after its empire fell. In our fantasy example, Numenor's lore masters and scholars preserved knowledge that would influence the ages to come, even as their hubris began to darken their legacy. In the Wasp Empire, meanwhile, the Wasp Empire's intellectual advancements focused on technological superiority, creating weapons and tools that reinforced their dominance, but alienated their subjugated neighbors, including the infamous bee killer substance. The Golden Age is a time of dazzling brilliance, but as history and fantasy remind us, it's also precarious. The same wealth and achievements that define the era often sow the seeds of overreach, inequality, and decline. For your fantasy empire, the Golden Age is a perfect moment to show both the heights of its splendor and the cracks forming beneath the surface, without necessarily needing to explore the depths of the fall. Alrighty, now that we understand what the Golden Age is and why it's cool, it's time to move on to the non-imperial cultures gathered under the empire's boot. And if you want to ensure that your Golden Age of world building keeps flourishing, you could join my newsletter for exclusive content. I have a quarterly newsletter in which there are exclusive insights, giveaways, and behind-the-scenes content. Subscribers also have the opportunity to ask questions on my website, which I will answer in follow-up newsletters, and which might feature in future videos on this channel. The link is in the description. It's completely free, comes out 4 times a year. What are you waiting for? Go sign up today. Okay, enough of the pitch. Back to empires and their conquered territories. Okay, so here's the other side of the Golden Age. While the imperial core enjoys prosperity, the conquered regions tell a very different story. For the subjugated, life under empire is a complex balancing act between assimilation, resistance, and survival. As we said earlier, different parts of the empire can exist in entirely different states at the same time, reflecting the empire's uneven control and integration. So, let's start with those cultures that get assimilated and see what impact that has on those people. Some conquered regions embrace the imperial culture, willingly or reluctantly, blending their own traditions with those of their rulers. This process of assimilation strengthens the empire's cohesion, but often erases or suppresses the unique identity of the conquered. Romanization is a great example of this, and it transformed regions like Gaul and Hispania. Local elites were often co-opted into Roman administration, adopting Roman laws, Latin language, and customs. Infrastructure projects like roads and aqueducts tied these provinces into the imperial system, creating a shared identity that endured long after Rome's fall and can still be seen in their languages. However, not all regions assimilated equally. While Gaul embraced Romanization, Britain remained much more tenuously integrated. Now, over in China, the Han Dynasty's integration of border regions relied on Confucian ideals and administrative reforms. Local leaders were often educated in Confucian principles and brought into the imperial bureaucracy, ensuring their loyalty. Yet regions like the Qingnu borderlands resisted deeper assimilation, creating a patchwork of control. And coming back to the West, to the African empire of Axiom, they used trade as a means of cultural assimilation. Coastal regions along the Red Sea often adopted Axiomite customs and later Christianity, fostering a shared identity, especially through the religion. However, inland areas frequently retained their distinct traditions, operating as semi-autonomous vassals rather than being assimilated into the Axiom Empire. And we can see the same kind of effect in our fantasy examples. In Tolkien's Legendarium, Numenor's influence over Middle-earth varied. Some regions, like Eriador, welcomed Numenorian innovations, while others saw their arrival as an encroachment. The Numenorians' growing arrogance turned cultural exchange into cultural dominance, sowing resentment even as their influence spread. And the Wasp Empire and Shadows of the App didn't even make a pretense at being anything other than conquerors. They just imposed their ideology like jackbooted thugs and their technological advancements all over their subjugated kingdoms. Some groups adapted to WASP rule, adopting their practices and technologies to survive or thrive, but this came at the cost of their cultural identity. Jackbooted thugs, man. That's what the WASPs are. Okay, so that's when cultures are assimilated into the core imperial culture. But what about those cultures that push back? Let's talk about cultures that resist the empire. Not all conquered regions submit quietly. Resistance, whether open rebellion or subtle defiance, is a constant threat to imperial stability. The Golden Age might be a time of prosperity for the core empire, but on the fringes, the struggle continues. For example, resistance defined Rome's relationship with regions like Judea, where multiple Jewish revolts drained resources and forced Rome into costly campaigns. Similarly, Britain's resistance under Boudica demonstrated how fragile Roman control could be at the empire's edges. And on the other side of the Silk Road, the Qingnu raids on Han territory exemplified resistance at the border. While the Han expanded and solidified their core, the frontier regions remained volatile, requiring constant military vigilance. And in our Red Sea trade empire, Axum faced resistance from Arabian tribes as it expanded into southern Arabia. These conflicts strained Axium's resources, showcasing how even a dominant trading empire can't fully control all its territories. And we see this on the fantasy side as well. The Shadows of the Apt series opens with the conquest of Mina, but this city also embodies resistance, repeatedly rebelling against the imperial yoke. That rebellion forces the empire to divert resources to maintain control, even as its golden age flourishes elsewhere. And of course, Numenor's expansion into Middle-earth was met with growing resistance, particularly as their presence shifted from benevolent guidance to exploitative rule. This tension set the stage for Sauron's eventual manipulation of the discontented. Okay, so that's outright assimilation and fierce resistance. But is there a third way for the conquered nations to follow? I'm glad you asked. Let's talk about adapting without losing your identity. For many conquered regions, survival is the name of the game. These societies adapt, finding ways to coexist with their conquerors while preserving their cultural essence. Over time, the survival strategy often plants the seeds for future successor states or revolutions. In the Roman context, some regions like Egypt preserved their local traditions under Roman rule. While Rome imposed its systems, the Egyptian religious and cultural identity endured, influencing some Roman practices and setting the stage for later cultural rebirths. As we spoke about in episode 1 of this series, the Han used a tributary system in many border regions, allowing local leaders to retain some autonomy as long as they acknowledged Han dominance. This arrangement allowed these regions to preserve their traditions while still contributing wealth to the empire. And in fantasy, our best example of this is the Bee Kingdom from Shadows of the Apt. They often found ways to maintain their traditions while outwardly complying with imperial demands. These covert acts of cultural preservation became rallying points for later rebellions. What about your empire? Not only should you let me know in the comments below, but you should hit the form I've created for submitting your empire using this cyclical model. I'll go through those submitted empires in a live stream and cover the ones that I enjoyed the most. In addition, the empire I like best will win its owner a signed copy of my first book, so check that out on the link below. Okay. So I think at this point it should be clear that a crucial aspect of imperial life during the Golden Age is its uneven development. While the imperial core enjoys affluence and intellectual achievements, frontier regions often remain in earlier phases of conquest or commerce. This disparity can both fuel the empire's growth and create tension. And we can see this pretty clearly in our examples. While the Roman heartland basked in the Pax Romana, Britain and Judea simmered with rebellion, and the Germanic frontiers faced constant military pressure. The Golden Age in Rome was not universal. It was fragmented by geography and local circumstances. And the same applies in the East. Central China thrived during the Golden Age, with flourishing cities and Confucian reforms. But the border regions faced raids and they remained militarized zones. Those disparities highlight how even the most prosperous empires juggle multiple realities. The conquered people of an empire are never a monolith. For every province that embraces the empire, another resists, and yet another finds ways to endure. These regional differences are the lifeblood of storytelling in imperial settings, offering layers of complexity and conflict in your world. As you build your empire, consider how its golden age shines differently depending on where you stand, under the gilded dome of the capital or in the shadow of the empire's reach. And if you've enjoyed this video so far, hit that thumbs up button and let's talk about the cracks beneath the glitz of empire during the Golden Age. While the Golden Age dazzles, it hides 4 pretty giant fractures, which will come into play in the next video in this series, but we'll cover them briefly here. The first is wealth inequality. The empire grows rich, but its elites grow richer. This disparity alienates the lower classes, as we discussed in the video on social cohesion. The second crack is cultural dilution. As diverse cultures integrate, the core identity of the empire often weakens. Think of Rome's reliance on non-Roman troops, which eventually challenged its cohesion. As we said in the cohesion video, when an empire is young, it's really good at integrating other cultures. But as it settles into the Golden Age, it can no longer integrate people without losing parts of its core culture. The third crack is overextension. Maintaining vast territories and bureaucracies strain resources and trust. Axiom's overreach into the Arabian Peninsula is a historical example. In fantasy, Numenor's exploitation of Middle-earth triggered its eventual downfall. Even the Rome and Chinese empires struggled once their realms grew to a sufficient size. And the WASP expansion into the lowlands would see its attention on the core of its empire dilute to the point where its fall became inevitable. And then, of course, there's crack number 4, bureaucratic rigidification. At its peak, the empire's administration becomes sprawling and impersonal, eroding the trust of its citizens. Instead of a dynamic and flourishing government, the structures of power become more bloated and more expensive to maintain, until giving aid to a citizen costs 2 or sometimes even 3 times more than the aid actually rendered in terms of bureaucracy and snarled red tape. These cracks are warning signs of the decline phase to come, and your world building can lean into these elements to foreshadow the fall of your fantasy empire, if that's where your story is going to go. And indeed, those widening cracks are what we'll discuss the next time when we talk about the decline of empire and what can be done to kick the fall of the empire can down the road and lengthen the life of the realm. So make sure you stay tuned for that. But when building your golden age, consider the following questions. What does prosperity look like in your empire? How are benefits shared between regions? How do the conquered cultures react to empire? Which of them are assimilated, which resist, and which adapt and survive? What signs of future decline are present during the Golden Age? And how does your empire maintain social cohesion as its diversity grows? Empire may shine at their brightest in their golden age, but the seeds of their downfall are often sown in the same soil. Use this phase to show the height of the glory and the shadows lurking underneath. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the Golden Age, hit like, subscribe, let me know in the comments how your fantasy empire peaks and what it costs. And thank you to all the members of this channel who not only get early access to these videos, but also help me feed my cats every day. A very big shout out to Lupex Lakeshire, Katie Kofimug and Tony Lamana, just-in-timers of the Build It in Stone level, and Pablo Barrio, Patricio, Aya Shimimaru, Tiffany Felix, and Dylan Batera, just-in-timers of the Build It in Wood level. If you're hungry for more world building, check out my video on creating a bureaucracy in a fantasy world, or whatever the algorithm is recommending for you right now. And I will see you soon for another episode from Just-in-Time World Building, where we build what we need, when we need it. And if you want to ensure that your golden age of world building keeps flourishing, you could join my newsletter for exclusive content. Man, I really wrote that. Lord, I suck at this YouTube stuff. Anyway, exclusive content. Can you believe I wrote that? You know, the golden age of your world building. What was I thinking?